Hi, welcome everybody. You have found your way to the Scholé Academy Lunch and Learn, and this is our opportunity for instructors, parents, students, people from other schools, wherever you're joining from and however you're finding us, you are absolutely welcome here on this fine Tuesday afternoon. You can have your camera on or off depending on where you are. And if you want to enjoy your lunch and sip your tea and just be in for along for the ride, you can just listen in, and there will be opportunity for our audience members to participate with us and to ask questions and to engage in the dialogue. And I want to say a very special welcome to Scholé Academy instructors, because this is, a good thing that we do over the summer is just really get a chance to connect with one another over real food for thought. Okay. So I have given my friend, Mr. Chris Marchand, a warm welcome here. So I'm going to introduce him because, again, I'm Joylynn Blake, the director of Scholé Academy, and I'm leading this discussion we're going to have today over this book, Against the Machine. And I really hope that a number of you all have actually read it or started to read it or enjoying it. But even if you haven't, I think that you'll find today's conversation helpful. And then Chris Marchand is a former Scholé Academy instructor who is still teaching with us over the summer. In fact, he's doing a Tolkien summer course right now, and he let his friends know that he'd be on this conversation with me and they would resume later. So it looks like maybe he's even got some friends and buddies here with him today. So welcome, students, as well. We're so glad that you're here. Let me introduce Mr. Marchand formally, and then so that those of you who've never met him before know, and then I'll give a little personal anecdote of why I've invited him into this conversation on this book. Okay, so Reverend Chris Marchand is a music pastor and a priest within the Anglican Church in North America. He serves in Illinois, and he holds a Master of Theological Studies and a Master of Arts in Music Ministry from Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary. And he was also trained as a hospital chaplain in a residency program in St. Francis Hospital. He's also a former headmaster and a teacher at Aletheia Classical Christian School, and he's taught humanities, history, science, government, all kinds of courses. He's married, they have 4 children. He's the author of Celebrating the 12 Days of Christmas. It's a guide for churches and families, and he produces podcasts, he composes music, he loves to discuss anything related to the arts, his favorite sport, tennis, all kinds of interesting current events. Um, Now, you can see Mr. Marchand is a super cool dude, but he also, the reason he got invited into this particular conversation is that my very own daughter Eliza had taken classes with him at Scholé Academy in the past. And she's like, Mom, you got to invite him to my graduation ceremony. We live states away, but you got to invite him. And, because she's a big Mr. Marchand fan. And her request for any and all of her graduation guests was, tell me music you recommend to me or books you recommend to me. And Mr. Marchand, unprompted, wrote back to her and said he recommended this book. So this is very intriguing to me and interesting. So we're going to kind of get into that. But I was like, well, Chris, if you're recommending this book even to, students, graduating students, that tells me that there's something substantial to be gained from it. And so I said, why don't you just join me for this conversation that we're going to have with others? So, Chris, do you want to say hi to the fine folks here and add anything to that?
Well, it's good to be with you, and it's been like a year since I've actually fully taught at Scholé, and yeah, I don't know. This book, there's a lot to it, and I kind of felt like I said to Joylynn, like I'm cramming for the test because it's like, how do you encapsulate everything that's in each individual chapter? And I don't think we'll do that, but maybe we can just kind of sit with some of the ideas and ponder them together.
which is exactly what he does really well in his in classes, and what so many of our instructors, I know that the beauty of what you do is to kind of lay out the feast for students, talk, read through it, digest it together, and give the space and the opportunity to ponder it. And so without further ado, we will launch in. The format that we're going to follow is that Chris and I will share some thoughts. I will kind of initiate some sharing of some thoughts and some responses from him. And then in the latter portion of our time together this afternoon, we'll open it up for audience interaction and participation and joining in the dialogue. Okay. And feel free to use the chat box with discretion to put any questions you may have or things that you would like us to discuss. We don't want to use the chat box as a spot for noise, but it will be a spot that if you want to put a question there for us to address later. Okay. So, um, again, the book that we're discussing, and could you, on your screen or something in the chat, if you have read or are reading the book, could you give a little thumbs up? I think it'll be just good to see some, yeah, thumbs up or hand raise or whatever. Yeah. Okay. All right. Great. Great. So we have a number of folks who are actually reading. Look, Amy, way to bring that book to class. I mean, Miss Travis, and others. So great. Great. So I'm sure it's given you all plenty of food for thought already. So I wanted to start though with a recommendation that my son gave. This is my adult son who is reading it along with me or has read it twice now or going through it. And he's like, Mom, if you talk to people who haven't yet read it or looking to read it or considering it, you need to issue a warning. If you recognize this image or seen this movie, who's seen or known this movie? Anybody seen it? Yeah. Okay. So this is an image from The Matrix, which is actually referenced in the book. And the main character Morpheus hands, the red pill or the blue pill, the decision to either engage in having the scales taken from one's eyes or the, deceptions torn away, and then you see the actual world that you're living in, or hey, just go on living your happy life with the deception that you have. And of course, I do this a little bit, tongue in cheek, but my son at least felt like that this was in a way a form of taking the red pill. It's a form of seeing, oh, I'm seeing things in ways that I hadn't seen them before, and it leaves me with a sense of gratitude and discomfort. I'm glad to know some of the truth, and I am also unsettled. Anybody else feel similarly to some of those things? Yeah, so there is your fair warning that you can feel some gratitude, but then there will be some sense of like I may not be able to see the world and technology and where the modern flow of things is headed. With the same sense of peace and serenity and just taking it without thought, you may feel a little unsettled. And so there's your fair warning. Okay. Now, the thing that I wanted to us to talk through is the title of the book is Against the Machine, right? So I thought what we could do is what is the machine that is being referred to? And then why against it. Okay. So, um, before we launch into some of that definition, I wanted to say two things that you won't walk away from this conversation with. You won't walk away with clean and tidy resolution of, oh, and now we know exactly what to do. We said this last week or a couple of weeks ago with Ash discussing AI with us. There won't be a lot of clarity about now I know absolutely what actions to take. We will find ourselves at the end of this conversation still saying, What will this mean for my real life? And there will still be some things that we all individually have to grapple with. It won't be a tidy answer, but hopefully it will lean us in the direction to think wisely. Um, all right. So, having said that, let's talk through what does he mean by the machine? And I'm going to read a couple of excerpts and then I'm going to ask Chris to comment on your understanding of what he means by the machine. Okay. So if you have your books, going to take us first of all to the very opening pages in Roman numeral 15. And there's a little poem that is shared there. And so I'll just read this excerpt. What is meant by the machine? Okay. He says, um, you can feel something going on that's not a good thing. And it doesn't matter how many lies, damned lies, or statistics are produced to prove otherwise, you can feel this something is enveloping you. The Welsh poet R.S. Thomas described it chillingly in his poem Other, in a verse I've never forgotten since I read it. And here's the excerpt from the poem. The machine appeared in the distance, singing to itself of money. Its song was the web they were caught in, men and women together. The villages were as flies to be sucked empty. God secreted a tear. Enough, enough, he commanded. But the machine looked at him and went on singing. That's one poetic angle for what is the machine. It alludes to a sense of what it is. Now, I'll also take us to page 37 and 38. Again, if you have your books, you can turn there. At the bottom of page 37, here is another excerpt, okay? This then is the machine. It's not simply the sum total of various individual technologies that we have cleverly managed to rustle up cars, laptops, robot mowers, and the rest. In fact, such techniques, as Mumford calls them, are the product of the machine, not its essence. The machine is rather a tendency within us made concrete by power and circumstance, which coalesces in a huge agglomeration of power, control, and ambition. Turn the page. The machine manifests today as an intersection of money power, state power, and increasingly coercive and manipulative technologies which constitute an ongoing war against roots and against limits. Um, if you're looking as just a thumbnail sketch, a summary, some people would be like, oh, AI is the machine. But what these passages should help us to be aware of is that, again, it's this tendency and an appetite within us that was present long before AI and feels like it's being accelerated in a highly technologized society. So, that's a couple of passages. I want to also turn to on page 39 at the very bottom of the page, it says the machine is not simply a vast soulless mechanism for accruing material wealth. It is also in some deadly fashion a sacral object itself. Sacral, sacred object itself. It is its own enchantment. So, and one of the things that Kingsnorth brings out, if you've gotten very far in the book, is yeah, it's money, it's power, it's government, it's technology, it's all this, but then he shifts it to say there's even this sort of sacral element that people that it's kind of an object of worship. And that's something that raises another level of concern in our sentiments about it. And then the last piece that I will read is from page 133. So it's definitely further into the book. Um, and it's in the center of the page, page 133. The anti-culture of the machine brings with it its own values. They supersede the values of the pre-technological age, and they spring from the need and the drive of the machine itself. We could call them the four S's: science, the self, sex, and the screen. And he kind of defines these. Science is our modern society's answer to where we come from. These are great philosophic questions that people ask that give their life an orientation, that give our lives its trajectory and pathway. And these great questions, where do we come from? And Kingsnorth is saying we're looking to science to answer that, not to God, not to the divine, but that science is the answer for where we come from. Then the self defines who we are. The highest good in the modern mind is to serve the self and ensure its longevity. And then sex being what we do, the highest means of sacral pleasure, and through public expressions of sexuality, an affirmation of individual identity. And we definitely have seen this in the modern world, that that has become an integral part of a person's understanding of self and their identity. And lastly, the screen being our, tell us where we are going. The screen is both our main source of distraction from reality, and it is the interface by which we are directed into the coming post-human reality of the machine. If the machine is an ideology, I suggest that these four notions are a fair summary of it. Perhaps, though, it's less an ideology and more of a theology. So, with those excerpts, I hope that gives you kind of an indication of how he defines what the machine is. Chris, I want to pitch it to you and ask you, is there anything you'd add to that, maybe as an artist or as a clergyman or anything? Like, would you further define the machine in any particular way?
Yeah, I guess I have a couple of things to say. You started off by saying there's when you start reading this book, there are elements to it that'll really challenge you. And so one of the things is even on the bottom of that page 133, he mentions all these other ideologies. And even at the end of the book, even towards the end, he also like so he mentions the post-Enlightenment. He mentions socialism, liberalism. And by the way, liberalism in this sense doesn't mean just being really, progressive and liberal. It's more of this general idea of like the free-minded person, the free-minded society. But liberalism, fascism, nationalism, and then even at the end of the book, he says conservatism. And I think for those of us here that we come from, like we see ourselves in that identity. The challenge that I think that he offers is he says, no, that's going to be subservient to the machine too. And like all of it can be just like it's squeezed into like when you're putting when you're making hamburger or something, you're making sausage. It just like it's like no, it's all getting squeezed into that thing called the machine. I think that's kind of fascinating. Um, I guess you asked if I have an artist's perspective on this. I do have like one example, and this comes out of the worship world, like church music world. I grew up loving what is known as the modern worship movement, modern worship music in evangelical Protestant churches. And like I have books on my shelves kind of detailing the history of modern worship from the 1970s onwards and things. What's interesting is as soon as in the late 90s and early 2000s, new types of worship songs were becoming popular, and immediately it started to go across Christian radio. And now we just live in this perpetual machine of what's the next newest latest worship song. And for those of us in Protestant, churches, evangelical churches, you may have this feeling where it's just like, oh man, I feel like I barely knew that song we sang last week, and they're already pushing a new song on us now. If you look at some of those songs, some of them are written by 5 to 10 different people. And that's not a sin. That's not necessarily bad. But what you're seeing there is like this push to the always the new, always the progressing, always the next thing. And I guess maybe my point is the machine exists even within our church organizations and like the push that we have. And I remember like in the 90s, I was at a youth conference in the late 90s, and they were pushing the importance of logos in church ministry, right? Like because a logo will signal something to the youth and to the culture. And it's just kind of fascinating. Like you kind of start to see how this it's always this push for more. Something is I think maybe what really begins to feel kind of just gross, icky, is everything can become commercialized, right? So even in today's world, there's trad culture, traditional culture, and well, what's the big push is, well, you got to have a good Instagram follower. If you're going to be a true, trad person, you gotta show what you're making every day for your family on Instagram or TikTok. And so it's kind of funny how even that becomes part of the machine. Now, granted, I imagine there's plenty of people that just do it without getting any attention for themselves. But it is kind of fascinating how in our culture, everything has this push to be commoditized, to be commercialized, to be part of the greater money making machine that he's kind of pointing to here. I don't know. There you go. There's my 2 cents worth.
I love that you brought that up. And I love that at Scholé Academy, we have obviously we have plenty of Protestant tradition represented in our families and our instructors. And at the same time, we have the Catholic tradition represented and we have the Orthodox tradition. And what's been very fascinating for me to learn as we interface with these various traditions is I think some would be saying, at least my Orthodox friends, and you guys can chime in too, be like, yeah, and that's why we've been doing church the way we've been doing for so long. Because we're not trying to, do the latest and greatest, and we are trying to retain the continuity of what the early church did. But even that, I know out there in the ether, there's a conversation about the popularization of some things, ortho bros or whatever else it may be out there, that there are that no one, not one of us, is immune to what happens in the flow of culture, and we have to attend to what are we anchoring ourselves to in this process, in that flow. Um, so that's kind of the landscape of what is the machine. I do welcome you to, chime in. Thanks for the comment too that Vixie's made. She said that on the bottom of page 18, the process of uprooting us from nature, from culture, and from God leads us into a mass society controlled by and for technology. That's a great summary. Thank you, Vixie. Um, I don't want to jump too quickly to the kind of recommendations as a result, but it has been striking me as a point of um, helpful contemplation and anchoring in this process is that um, Christ entered a real and complex time period in history. And it wasn't this idealized time period that was, Roman occupation and government, mass governmental efforts, whether that was in construction and language, and but that I just um, comfort myself with the truth that if Christ himself felt that it was a space that he could enter, we ourselves, as his followers, should not feel that retreat from the world is our only answer. I think there is a way that there is still the entering piece of entering, but discriminating participation, and what we can say yes to and what we can say no to and what we can say, I don't know. I got to hold that intention. Um, okay. So now let's go then to, okay, if we understand and see this kind of summary of what is a machine, then why the notion of being against being against. And I know, Chris, I had said that, I'd make some remarks and then pitch it to you, but I think I want to reverse that a little bit and get some of your initial thoughts about from your read of the book so far. Um, why do you think the posture is, well, against it? Yeah.
I mean, this is a fascinating question. And you kind of started off in a place too where you addressed the AI issue. And in the book, at periodic
Periodic time.
times, he addresses that as well. But I think what's fascinating about what he does, and boy, I have questions and I have pushback. I want to add to his conversation. I don't just simply agree with everything he says or the perspectives that he offers. But I think what's really fascinating, and maybe this is kind of where we can think about our own kids, is this AI moment that we're in is actually part of a longer story. Like this is in some sense the culmination. So many times when I speak to people, some people about AI and the usage of it and the place of it, and I see a lot of it like in workplaces, right? It's always kind of this idea of the inevitability of it. It's just like, well, it's here now, and then they kind of use this as this incredible argument it's a mic drop kind of argument, and you kind of go, oh, I guess I have nothing to say to that, right? It's here to stay now. We better learn how to utilize it. What's fascinating about like why to resist the machine is that that like the AI thing is kind of like the apex of these people with vast wealth beyond what we can comprehend, and they have some very disturbing ideas about like leading us into a kind of post-human existence. It's very, very strange. Like there's a whole section towards the end of the book, and I've done some reading on this myself. I mean, there is a type of idea out there called like extinctionism, human extinctionism. Whether they think they're leading us into a new kind of collective consciousness, or they're like the Tower of Babel, they're recreating God itself. These are the people that are making this technology. Like this makes me scratch my chin and go, you want to use this to write your papers? Like these are the people that are like it's coming from these types of people. They have a kind of, to me, a kind of sociopathic mindset. I think, if I'm not mistaken, towards the end of the book, he's like he throws around antichrist terminology. He's like, "Hey guys, I'm pretty sure this is antichrist." Again, not saying the antichrist necessarily, but just saying, "Boy, this goes against what does it mean to like the true God, right?" So in that sense, I don't know what we're supposed to do about it. Like because okay, if we reject using AI, does it also mean we reject smartphones? Does it mean we reject the internet itself? Hey, we're on the internet right now, hey, everybody. What does that mean? That to me is a fascinating question, but at least at the very beginning, it's like, oh, maybe I should be very careful about how we utilize this new technology, but everything that's related to that technology as well. So there you go.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
knew there was a reason that we needed to, kick this part of the topic off with you because that is just a really, really great lead into some observations that I wanted to make. And so I'm going to share this notion and see, maybe you guys know this. Anybody know the poem by Robert Frost, Fire and Ice? I have been meditating on this for probably 3 solid years. And in a way, it is this observation of like the end of all things, the end of the world. Okay, the end of the world. Some say the world will end in fire. Some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice. Okay, you gotta read it a few times, but essentially it is this idea of Desire being symbolized by fire, right? The red hotness of desire, but just our appetites, human appetites, and saying actually human appetites will be probably, from what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. That will be the end of the world, is human desires will consume it. But hate is being symbolized by ice, the coldness of hate. And so for some people, they're really terrified of what the AI is in terms of military actions, machines taking over, things being the Terminator reality, so to speak, that being that maybe the end of the world will come with that kind of overreach of the machines. For myself, I'm with Robert Frost on this that I still land with those who favor fire. I think the end of the world, not so much like Terminator, but more like this one. Anybody ever seen Wally? Come on, raise the hand. Uh, when that movie came out, I was like, this thing is prophetic. There is something about human desire and left unchecked and what it will lead to. And of course, it's the hover chairs, it's the loss of any muscle mass, it's the we only know how to relate to each other through screens, it's the on and on that to me that is the caution and the warning about why we are against it. Why would we be against the machine? Well, on one level, this is not the picture of human flourishing that one I want personally, but two, I think that Christ gave us. And if this is where the machine is leading, that to me is a reason to be against it. Now, and this is a little shout out to Mr. Marchand too, who again is teaching a Tolkien course right now. But if you've read The Lord of the Rings, there's this moment where um, no, I was going to say Frodo. Bilbo is wanting to protect his precious, and of course it's the ring of power, and it's like protect it and don't encroach, don't how dare you? And at that point, Gandalf looms really large and is almost kind of ominous or threatening, like I am not trying to rob you. He sort of shocks him with a little fear. And then this kindness comes all over his face, and he's like, I'm trying to help you. Give me the ring. Let it go. Um, for me, this has been a good image to meditate on, in that if my appetites and if my desires and if what's being fueled is leading me in the direction of the Wally hover chair or in the direction of growing less and less human, then I have to be willing to like surrender something of the human appetites that I want satisfied for a greater good. Surrender the short-term satisfactions for the long-term gain. And I feel like as Christians, we have always had the prescription of what that looks like. And it is fasting and limitation. It is not satisfying all our desires. And the one other thing, and Chris, you kind of alluded to this, that I'll stop the screen share after this, but Christ told us this clearly. He said that the thief is coming, and like Chris, you mentioned extinctionism, and people who are like actually wanting to get us to a place of extinction. Whose work is that? The anti-Christ, the work of the thief coming to steal, kill, and destroy. And when we are actively participating in that, whose work are we doing? Meanwhile, the contrast of that, Christ saying, I've come that they can have life and have it to the full. Um, but what does it look like to follow Christ in the context of a machine that is encroaching and all consuming and even promising the satisfaction of our desires and our immediate appetites, I would humbly suggest that it is grappling seriously with the reality and the necessity of fasting, limiting the satisfaction of our appetites. And then, even the more radical suggestion that I think is worth entertaining, and the church has done this for many, many, for millennia, is then outright abstinence of some things. And I think I love the New Testament that commends and testifies to like marriage and the marriage bed being good. But then there's these portions that Paul says, but I wish that everybody could be as I am if possible, because, there's some, I've been thinking of that as a metaphor at times for yet we know that the satisfaction of human desires are God-given, and there's the satisfaction of them. There are frameworks and structures for doing that are celebrated and fully endorsed. But then there is a recognition of the times and spaces and that we live in, and the necessity at times for abstinence. And I've been thinking of that in terms of technology and in terms of AI and in terms of other things, that is there merit for us considering not just rationing, not just even fasting at times, but for some of us, those to whom are called to this vocation of, the abstinent um, person in relation to some of these technologies, because really the power of their corruption is too great to even play with. Um, okay, I've showed my hand on so many things that I meant to be a little bit more rationing about, but those are some of my thoughts. I'm going to pitch it one more time to Chris to comment on that, and then we'll open it up to everybody else. Chris?
Yeah, so hopefully I'm gonna say something, but then maybe it'll lead to conversation. I've listened to a few interviews with Paul Kingsnorth, and I listened to another podcast with I think they were kind of Catholic theologian scholars. I'm not really sure. There's a lot of stuff out there, but they had a really interesting conversation, and they were really pushing back against him. And so let me ask a cheeky question first to kind of get us thinking. Um, you know, Kingsnorth comes out of the left, the capital L left. Very much an environmentalist, a greenie type of thing. And so it's interesting his journey he's now an Eastern Orthodox Christian, I think under the Romanian church, but he lives in Ireland. But he just has a really interesting journey from kind of radical environmentalist, but he's also not a Marxist. He's anti-capitalist, but he's not a Marxist. You know what I mean? So he just has a complicated set of his background. So the cheeky thing that I wanted to say is one of the things that he might be implicating for us, and you talk about abstinence, Joylynn, is I think he might just want us to like go and forage in the forest. Go live off some acorns and what you can find in the creeks. And I'm not quite 100% sure. I'm kind of joking, or maybe I'm not. I'm not really sure. So one of the big critiques that this podcast I was listening to is there is a very much of a tension between, does God intend us to live in the garden, or does God have us live in the city? Right. And so we look to Revelation, things end in the city. And so they were really pushing back on him because he had too idealistic a vision of like it's all garden for Paul Kingsnorth. And these guys seem to be kind of pro city for some reason. And I kind of wanted to push back against them. And I'm like going, cities? You're going to argue for cities? Like my question would be is, if we are ending in a city, do we have any picture of what God's city looks like yet? You know? And maybe what I would want to put forth is like, boy, what if we had the city garden? And what I mean by that is, yeah, we can't just be foraging around in the forest in 2026. I mean, some of us can do that, but there has to be something more because there's going to be a lot of people that are like, they're going to be dying pretty soon if that's the answer. but the cities aren't all that great either sometimes. And they're, that feeling when you walk onto, a city street and you're like, why does it smell like this? Or whatever the thought is. And so I guess I leave it there kind of what for those of us that have read it, I'm curious, and Joylynn, you feel free to lead us, is what imagination is this leading us into? Like, what are we thinking? Like, how are we now to live? He actually asked that question several times, or it reminds me of the Chuck Colson book, Nancy Pearcey. How then shall we live? So I'll leave it open to discussion from here.
That's right. It is open now for discussion and observation. Who has a comment?
And if anybody has any foraging tips, let us know. I did watch a video once on how to process acorns and how to make acorn meal. So, and it looked pretty tough.
I have
So,
a I have a question. This is Emily.
yeah.
Sorry,
Hi.
my video's off. I'm currently curling my hair.
I love it, Emily. And listen, if we were in the forest, we would have nothing to plug those curling irons in. There
No
would be.
curling iron. It's a big no vote. It's really going back to the original start. I have multiple ages of my children, but
Mhm,
I haven't read the book yet. I'm going to read it myself this summer because this is the first I've heard of it, and
mhm,
I'm really excited to read it. I my oldest is 21. She's in college, and I have a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old. And so my question is, for all three of them, for different reasons, I feel so hesitant to, from what I've heard today at least, to have them read it,
mhm,
um, because they all have different levels of angst, but all three of them share it about AI and their futures.
mhm,
They have like almost what I would consider almost like an anxiety, and all their friends
mhm,
are the same way.
mhm,
So
mhm,
my question
mhm,
is, if I read it and I still feel that way,
mhm,
is that does that constitute, an overprotectiveness that is
mhm,
unhelpful to my children, especially my older two children, kind of saving it for myself, what knowledge can be gleaned from it and protecting them? Am I going too far? 12-year-old, I understand, but the 16 and 21-year-old, would you, am I wading into overprotective mothering by saying, no, no, this is too depressing
mhm,
for them? They already are halfway there. They could probably write a lot of what's in the book themselves because they
mhm,
think and talk so much about it. But I do think I have a sense that I've probably waded into protecting them,
mhm.
my older two, too much at this stage of the game. So that's my comment slash question.
Oh, I love that question. And I certainly, I'll give you my instinctive response and then definitely welcome anybody else to chime in. I hear you. I hear you, Mama, because of we don't want to fuel the anxiety. Because I think fundamentally he is pointing to a legitimate thing we should be cautioned against. That I think it's more dangerous, more reckless to avoid the caution than to actually just take it. And so I now you have to use discernment because you obviously know your own kids and all of us, and sometimes it's like, no, like you said, maybe they could write the book themselves and I don't need to fuel the fire. But um I think that he gives voice in some concrete and some poetic ways to why this is worth thinking about and not being dismissive of. And so for that reason, I would say it's helpful and worthwhile, even though it is a little red pill, blue pill. Anybody else have a thought like, no, don't do it? Because that's welcome too. Laura, go ahead,
I was
China.
gonna say, so I thought I kind of experienced the same thing as I was reading it. I felt like it increased my anxiety about the world. And I did think that the ideas were helpful, but I think like Emily was saying, a lot of the young people already know this. And if that's already their bent, I think it was Saint Porphyrios said, like, look at Christ. Don't look at evil. Evil will take care of itself. Look at Christ, and that's what will save you. So if they already recognize something as dangerous, I don't know that you need to push them further on like, no, this is really dangerous. You already know it's dangerous, but look how dangerous it is. Um, I think what we need more to talk about, Emily, with your children and some of us is like, what does the alternative look like? We're against the machine, but what are we pro? And I would have liked to see more of that in the book itself. I know it's hard because I think he wanted to write this book for not necessarily Christian audiences. He wanted everyone to be thinking about this, and the answer is Christ. And so you can't necessarily like put that in the book, if you want to throw this out as a warning for society in general and still have it be a popular book. But that's what I would have liked to see more of and talk more about.
Really quickly, let me just jump in and say, I would say it is worth it. And I, Laura and all of you, I understand like the anxiety stuff. I mean, boy, oh boy, I understand. I would say it's worth it because of his historical survey and how he brings in all the other voices. So in that sense, maybe for your kid, I'm sorry, I can't remember who asked the original question, and maybe it was Emily. In that sense, it's like that to me was worth it because he's bringing in some authors I was kind of aware, like Truman, and like I knew about that, but like then there's all this other stuff I didn't know. So in that sense, understanding the paradigm of his warning, it's bigger than just like the AI thing that's scaring us all right now. And I fully agree, Laura. I wonder there's got to be another book coming, right? He's part of the machine now too. Paul Kingsnorth, he's part of the publishing machine. But it does feel like there's another book in terms of like, well, what are we supposed to do? Like what are we how are we supposed to live now? Yeah.
Amy.
Yeah, I think I too, as I was reading it, I kept saying to my husband, is he going to point us to Christ? Is he going to get there? Is he going to? And then, but then going back and looking at all my annotations that I made throughout the book as I was reading it just highlight a couple of things that I think personally I want to take away. And on page 5, he says, the path back to the garden can only be found by giving up the vainglory, the search for power, and the unlearned knowledge which got us exiled in the first place. The path is the path of reunification, of love, and of sacrifice. To get back to the garden, we have to go through the cross, he says. And then on 12, he says, but the point is not to make an idol of the past, but to recognize that when a culture kills its sovereign, the throne will not remain empty for long. And so it brought me to the thinking that I think it was Laura just said, what are we putting in that place? You know, if we take something out, then what are we putting in? And then at the very end of the book, or close to the end, on page 307, he says, pass any technologies you do use through the sieve of critical judgment. What or who do they ultimately serve? And I thought that was critical, as we were saying, is, you know, that as teachers, as parents, yes, we're wanting to grow our children, to teach our students against vices, but are we training in virtue alongside that? Are we filling that so that they have that discernment? And then, of course, in the middle of the book, he does talk about how I have to grow up, which is difficult for all of us, isn't it?
Amy, I love those excerpts that you drew. Let's hear from Vixie.
Well, I too kind of felt a bit of that. Well, I know the problem now. What is it you want me to do? And I kind of drew from different parts of it. Chapter 17 is called "Keep the Home Fires Burning," and I think in there is where we really see so much of what he's wanting us to do. On the bottom of page 183, he says, strip the last remaining fires from the last remaining hearths, and you are one step closer to what is perhaps the ultimate ambition of the machine, the abolition of home. And then right below there, he says the machine exists to create dependency. And I think for all of us, you know, as homeschoolers, as homeschool teachers, we're a little further into this, but I think he's really saying here that the home, just as we know from the Bible, the home is really where everything is, where it begins, where it should be. And we need to be really careful to make sure that our home has the place that it should be for ourselves, for our children, our grandchildren, our families. And I think it's a really good place. Whoever it was talking about their children and that fear, to be able to take them back to, and to say, we can't ever lose the importance of home. We know that from the Bible, but we also see that from here. And one of my girlfriends is just really, she's very political and everything. She has a huge garden, always saying, you never know when we're not going to be able to get food. And I saw all of this in this chapter, and I thought, you go, Valerie, because I think you're onto something here. But I thought this was a very important chapter here for us.
Thank you, Vixie. Sarah Beth and then Madison.
Yeah, hopefully the baby won't wake up while I'm talking. I would echo a lot of what other people are saying. Mostly the fact that my husband and we've had a lot of discussion on this book. We got it and been reading it together. Just trying to figure out like what I don't think he has a good he doesn't have a good process for how we can use technology well. My husband is a computer engineer. He works with computers all day, and he's like, don't think what I'm doing is wrong. And if I take Kingsnorth at his word, like what I'm doing is just a waste of my life. And we certainly have our concerns with AI, and we definitely want to be having rules and systems in place to not be sucked into all the things people talk about, social media, or just wasted time on the computer, things like that for us and for our children. But I just wish he had more. I mean, maybe he thinks you just shouldn't use this new technology at all. I feel like I'm really scatterbrained. There's so many thoughts on this. And then also, when we were talking about the city and the garden, I was shocked the first time my husband said, well, the Bible points toward a city. And I was like, wait a second. Because I'm the kind of person who wanted to be a pioneer in the 1800s and all of that growing up. But after a lot of conversations, I see what he's saying. And I think I can't argue that the Bible does point toward a city, but it is a city with life and beauty and trees growing in it and a stream flowing through it. And so I liked your idea, was Chris, of the garden city, of both of the things together. Because I don't think the answer is going back to the garden. I think it is, we are moving toward a city and through the community of believers. Yeah, I just liked the term garden city. I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Sarah Beth. So good. Madison. Oh, unmute yourself again, Madison.
Oh, can you hear me now? Okay.
Yep.
I haven't completed the book yet, but it's fitting nicely on my shelf because I've noticed I have a section growing that deals with modernity and its problems and issues. And one thing I've noticed in some of the other books I've read that he actually mentioned, there was one by Patrick J. Deanon on why liberalism failed, and really understanding the modern iteration of liberalism and how it's different from its ancient counterpart, was that he reinforces this idea is that it's about liberating the individual from everything. So from responsibility to, family, people of the past, which, of course, attacks the virtue of piety. And how, like, you can see that's part of what the machine is doing, is trying to break down human connection and isolate. And so I think, it is a technology. And I think, like, members in the Church of the Past, like, we take something that can be used for good and baptize it. So I think this is where Scholé does a fantastic job of really kind of baptizing this space online to where we can use it to connect as opposed to disconnect with our students. Let's see, where else was I going? I got lost in my thoughts there for a bit. But yeah, I think that's kind of what I see that needs to be done, is like, let's kind of try to baptize this space, take it back for what's going to promote a human good, which is leading to that connectivity. Because I think, of course, the machine wants to continue to like break it down and then monetize off the disconnectivity. So,
yeah, that's a great summary statement. Emily, chime back in.
It just reminded me of something that I never even thought of before until Madison just said that. She's actually one of my son's teachers, and so fabulous. But Scholé to me, I've had kids in, public and private and Christian and Latin Academy just because of our moves. But Scholé Academy to me right now at this year, this feels more familiar, like the public school of, 3 decades ago in Texas that I remember. So this school model that I couldn't have even imagined when I was young, of having my youngest one sit with a computer and virtual, classroom and live teachers and students who are on little tiles. It feels more familiar and more like school as I knew it than the current public school that one of my other kids goes to. So I think that's so interesting what she was just saying, like taking something and sort of baptizing it into something new. And why does it feel that way for me and for my son? Well, it's just completely infused with so much love and kindness and heart, and the teachers' hearts are in the right place, and the kids are loving to each other, and they're, safe. There's camaraderie, there's prayer. They talk about the Lord. God's word is in everything. So that, and again, I went to public school. So I think it's so fascinating that there's a recreated model that feels better in its technological form than the live, public school model of now. I just think that's pretty wild. Because you would think the public school model would feel more traditional and Scholé would feel more foreign, but it's flipped.
Mm.
So anyway.
Yeah, thank you for saying so. I agree. The atmosphere that Scholé teachers are able to cultivate in real connection. And I think I remember thinking there was no way in my lifetime video call would be a thing. As a kid, I watched Princess Leia lean over and say, "Help me, Obi-Wan, you're my only hope." And thought, the 3D video of what she was saying was just like so far out of reach. Now it's like a normal part of our life. And for my sons who live 3, 4 hours away, I love the fact that we can just get on FaceTime and there's this like connection to them that wouldn't have been possible just by phone, and certainly wouldn't have been possible just by Pony Express. So, lots of us feel the goodness, the real goodness that comes from these tools, these resources. I love what, Sophia put also in the chat about these tools. How are we deciding how to use the tools? Jennifer also mentioning the Amish being very technologically advanced because they thought it's the thoughtful adoption of the tool. Although recently I took an Uber when I was at a conference, and my Uber driver was telling me that the Amish are now one of the most avid users of his service as an Uber driver. And I'm like, how? They've got their phones and they're calling him. So it was interesting to think about the movement of tech into kind of all facets of society, even the Amish. Um, I know that Chris has got to skedaddle to do his Tolkien class, but I want to say thank you so much, Chris, for being here. You got any final words to say to us?
No, no, this is good. I like everyone's pushback. It's good. There's other big picture things that we could bring up, but there's just so much to it. So I appreciate the conversation from everybody. So it was great.
Yeah.
There's a lot of this stuff in Tolkien was against the machine. I'll say that. His whole use of Saruman and the idea of Mordor, so it's kind of interesting how he puts it into his own work in his own way in the early to middle 20th century. So anyway. Good to
Thank
be
you
with you.
so much. Great to be with you too.
Thank
Um,
you. Thank you.
so anybody who can hang on the call, we'll still stay to chat for just a little bit longer. And I will say I'm going to bring up another book to potentially recommend. Anybody seen this, Liturgies of the Wild? Anybody taking a look at that? Okay. Well, it's another one that I've been going through and reading through, and this too. And I really do invite you actually to unmute if you want to add further things. But okay, what I've heard all of us saying is, we all do sense he's onto something, and our kids know it too. But we also have this sense that the prescription for what we do about it is still ambiguous? Do we forage in the forest? Do we go back to a garden only mentality? Do we recognize there are computer programmers making our lives better? And do we say, we know we're headed to a city? How do we harness appropriately the use of the tools that we have developed and been gifted without letting those tools rob us of our humanity? Um, where is the balance? Where is the path, the way forward? And I guess I will bring up personally again, I think these are great questions to ask. I guess if I feel like there's a deeper trench or a bigger ditch on one side or the other, I personally do feel that it is, I already showed this, that the human appetite gone awry and our tendency to not respect limits in this modern society. So while I am ideologically very much in support of properly using technological tools, because I mean, goodness, this is how we do our work. So I love it. I endorse it. Properly using technological tools. But where I do feel the bigger danger, and I'm not going to say just for our kids, I'm going to say for us as the adults in the room, is the unchecked appetites and the unstoppable scroll and the unstoppable like momentum in our lives in the modern Western developed world to get to a state of maximum comfort, minimum discomfort. And how do we get there? That maximum comfort, minimum discomfort, and where that could potentially lead us in that, kind of Wall-E reality. And so to me, the notion of limit in our own lives and being us willing to accept some measured discomfort for a greater gain. So I thought I would read this tiny little excerpt from this book, and then you can see if you want to get it yourself. But it's stories interspersed with I guess not morals, but interspersed with let me give you some good things to think about, but giving them to you in fairy tale and in mythic form. Okay. This is the chapter called On Limit. Okay. And he says, there's a story that Saint Brigid met a woman who'd been blind since birth. Brigid healed her, and the full glory of this earth was revealed. Tears fell down her cheeks as she beheld the cormorant and the squirrel, the swaying barley, the orchard rosy with apples. But after a time, she wiped her eyes and asked Brigid for a further miracle, that she would be kind enough to blind her again. I will cherish what I've seen. I will never forget it. But down there in the fertile darkness, with its limit and depth, I was closer to God than I am here. Down there, I could really see. I've been asking the Lord about that in my life and then about my family. Like, I love the fact that Christ, he opened up the scriptures and right away was like Isaiah, I came to bind up the brokenhearted, to set the captive free, to open the eyes of the blind. Like, it was clear that he intended the healing and restoration he brought to be full and comprehensive. And yet we talk about how we live in the already of the kingdom, but then also in the not yet of it. And in my own life, I am asking for the mercy of limits. And that if it takes only partial healing right now, because he knows my frame and he knows my weakness and he knows my vulnerabilities and he knows my limitations, that if that means for me to see the deeper truths, I have to have some limits on my physical sight, like this story reveals. Then am I willing to take that bargain, to accept those limits? And again, for the greater good. So those are some of the things that I'm meditating on in my own life. So what does that mean? I will like say no to or say I won't partake in just because I know it could be a good, but its liabilities are so great and I mistrust myself, you know. Those are some of my thoughts. Okay, Sarah Beth, what do you want to add?
Sorry. Yes, that idea of limits. I forgot to say this before, but on page 306 to 307, and I think someone else quoted another part of this. He gives his two principles, and I actually struggled to figure out how these two principles exactly aligned with the foraging the forest kind of thing he seems to end with. Um, but he says first, drawing a line and saying no further, the idea of limits. Second, making sure that you pass any technologies you do use through a sieve of critical judgment. What or who do they ultimately serve? And I think my husband and I have talked about choosing to do things the slower way in this world because that is the ditch that we're more likely to forget. 200 years ago, everything was done. It seems like everything was done the slow way, or almost everything. And so people didn't have to specifically make that a part of their lives and make that limit a part of their lives. But now I'm thinking, especially within the things we do for fun, like my husband enjoys woodworking. I enjoy doing things like sewing or, um, sorry, those kinds of things. But there's always these things that can come out where it's like woodworking that basically does the woodworking for you, or embroidery on sewing machines that basically you program it, but then it doesn't, mostly does it for you. And I said, I don't really want to be doing that very much, especially for something we're doing as a hobby, as something we don't have to do, but instead choosing to do something more slowly. And then a final thought would be, I heard somewhere asking the question of what does a technology displace? It always displaces something, and maybe it's a good thing. Like I'm grateful for my laundry machine. It displaces doing the work by hand, and that allows me more time to do other things. But perhaps there are things that displace us that are good for us and that we should still be doing.
Oh, I love those thoughts. So rich. And I heard someone say, and maybe you guys can even tell me the source of this, that like if the work that you do is primarily the work of the mind and intellectual, then you rest with your hands. And then if the work you do is primarily work with your hands, you rest with your mind. Um, I think that's a great thing to meditate on as well. That that man, there is nothing like getting my hands in the sink and doing dishes at the end of the day when I've been on the computer a lot. It feels like therapeutic somehow. I'll put on some music and just like do that or fold some laundry or things like that. So I think that's also um, thoughtful for us to consider the various elements of our life. Anybody else want to offer some thoughts? Okay. Well, I guess the last thing that I would want to ask is like the takeaways of, or at least Sarah Beth kind of kicked us off with some very concrete or practical, like for her in her life, it's sewing and dealing with how much of the embroidery action do I outsource to a technical tool, or how much is the thing itself the I would be displacing the nourishment I'd be getting from the action by doing that. So thinking about that. I mean, we're going to have some great conversations in a couple of weeks too with Dr. Riley, and just talking about even our tech tools in the education space. In what ways are they helping facilitate where we're trying to head, and in what ways are they actually potentially subverting the process itself? So, does anybody have any practical applications or questions to put on the table for us to further ponder? And then, Sophia, I just love what you have been chiming in. Do you want to unmute yourself and just say hey and chime in, or I just welcome any of your remarks.
Uh, don't have much to say besides that I find these issues critical, absolutely critical, about what is the way of wisdom, what are tools, not inherently good or bad, and what's the way forward. And I found some really helpful thinkers in this way. I mentioned earlier the Greystone podcast, Joshua Klein. Yeah, it's been a couple years of following rabbit trails, and these are guys who I feel like have been a step ahead in asking questions and thinking through what does it mean for people who know the Lord, and who are committed to God's way and the biblical way. And what does that mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's all my thoughts, and I really enjoying this conversation and appreciate you're making this possible for us, because we all feel it too. Our children are being educated online, and so we feel this tension of, in the classical way, of how do we do these things together, and it's different answers for all of us. But thank you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I actually, in preparation for this conversation, I reached out to Paul Kingsnorth with just a, email that you can find online for him. And it was very precious. He didn't write back to me specifically, but his wife wrote back to me and is like, well, we're actually traveling and I'm helping manage his email, but we're thinking of you. And they homeschooled some of their own families, and it was just a real kind response. But she said that he had also been dealing with some health challenges recently. And it just reminded me, like, the invitation to prayer for all of us. Like, let's pray for Mr. Kingsnorth and his family. He's grappling with things, and these podcasters and all of us in our own lives, to uphold one another in prayer, to not sink under the swell of the anxiety, but instead that looking to Christ as the hope who dwelt in this space, in the human space, without being, totally unsettled by it. I'd love to hear what you have to say, Dr. Seward, and then we'll go to Dr. Riley.
So, in full disclosure, I'm only 60% through the book, so I may be speaking in ignorance. I love the conversation that we're having about how we personally relate to technology and all of that. My concern is what I would call sort of external forced technology. Can we call it techno-fascism? And what are we going to opt into? What are we going to opt out of? What are we going to, that I think is going, for me, going to be even the bigger challenge as AI and quantum computing, maybe even make a baby into a monster. And how do I relate to that and live with that? Because I think that could be coming. So that's all.
I am so glad you brought that up. I made a quick trip with my husband down to Austin the other day, and I was working from the hotel room. So we stopped at the Walmart right next door to the hotel or whatever, so that I could get some snacks to feed myself while I was there. If you go into Walmart, there is the internet there. I'm sorry, I don't even know the right terms, but they almost force you to be on the network. And the way that they're forcing you, I shouldn't have called out the actual brand of the store. Sorry, y'all, but they force you to be on the network, and it's so that they can track you, so that if you pause before a particular product, then they know what to send your way in terms of advertising and things like that. And you can't even like check your text messages without this pop up on your screen, or at least I couldn't, that like you can't move forward unless you're like, oh, okay, just inadvertently, oh, accept and get on that network. That's even a step removed from what you're saying, because even there was an opt-in, and I had enough warning signs. I'm like, no, you're not getting me on this network. Are you kidding me? I do not want like 1,000 ads sent my way related to the blah blah blah. But to your point, Christy, that like there's going to be some things we can't even opt. You can't do a Google search without AI being part of what you're doing right now. And that's going to become, I think, more and more so the case. Although I met somebody recently who said he called himself an apocalyptimist. He was like, AI is gonna come and go as fast. It's going to go as fast as it came. He felt optimistic. I was like, yeah, I don't share that at all, but I love that you have that optimism. Uh, so, I hear you. Dr. Riley, what do you want to say?
Well, just to add to what was just said, like a smartphone is already required in society, right? I can't even go to my kids' game without having a smartphone because they don't take cash anymore. They want you to scan this out and pay to get in if I don't have a smartphone. So, but yeah, technology is already kind of required in some ways. But the one thing that I wanted to mention was, as we talk about this machine and how sometimes as we're moving through life, things just become a part of our life without us even recognizing it. And maybe we make new habits and new behaviors as we adjust to that. And so, one thing I've tried to do is be more aware and cognizant of the behaviors that I'm adding to my life because of society and how it's changing. And one thing that really resonated with me a couple years ago was this idea of a lack of mentorship. Because you can just go to the internet and ask the internet any question you want, people don't go to experts anymore. They don't go to people who could mentor them and guide them along and tell them things that maybe that question that you ask the internet, it won't tell you because it's going to answer your specific question. It's not going to give you a wealth of knowledge that you really need to really understand the question that you're asking. And so that idea of mentorship and having mentors in your life and having people in your life who can guide you along and guide you through things, they're not thought out anymore because I can just go ask Google. And so that's one thing that I do with my own children is as part of our conversations, I talk to them every single day about their day. And one of the things I've started asking them a few years back was, what did you ask Google today? Like those are conversations that when we were younger, we would ask our parents, but they're not coming to the parents anymore to ask. Now they're going to Google to ask. And so, what did you ask Google today? And I remember one time my son asked Google how to get a girlfriend. And I was like, you ask a computer program who's never had human experience how to have a human experience. And I was like, I'm a girl. Your dad's a guy who got a girlfriend before. Why don't you ask us? And so, it's having those conversations over time, and I think it's helped in my own children's lives. But just that idea of mentorship and the lack of reaching out to find mentors and find people you can apprentice under.
That'll preach. That was a whole sermon. That was so good. And I think it actually relates to something Laura put in the chat too. And that's right. That Kingsnorth does allude to like even is AI in fact demonic? And I would say like that when Jesus exorcised the demons out of some people and sent them to the pigs and the pigs ran off the edge, pigs aren't demonic, but they seem to be a good carrier. And I am wondering like what is a good carrier for some antichrist sort of demonic influence. And to your point, Dr. Riley, like when our children and just the people around, like that's where you're going for counsel. Whose counsel are you getting? And with I heard too that like the most prominent use of AI, where it's doing amazing things in terms of coding and medical stuff and all kinds of stuff, but the most prominent use is for like therapy and people going to it for counsel and us being aware of the caution associated with where is that counsel coming from. And even if you don't want to use, kind of unsettling or unnerving words like demonic, let's just talk about the finances of it. It is set and designed to be affirmative, so you will use it more. So it's going to affirm the things that the user wants to hear. So it will create a state of dependence, you know, like the whole like chips and how they're coated with the special stuff so that you can't eat just one, or the cookies that you can't eat, you know. So that's also, I love that question about asking our kids, what did you Google today? Or what, you know, in creating in them, in a sense, an appetite for coming to us. And this is a real challenge because another temptation for us as parents is the longing. And I think it's even God-given longing. I want to have a hearing in my child's life. And so by default, I think that means I want them to like me. I want to be liked by them. And then the spiral for that could be, well, and to be liked by them, I need to affirm them. And to affirm them, I need to not push back against, you know, wrong ideas in them, or not over parent, over mother, whatever. But where are they going to get it if they don't get it from me? If they can't trust me for good, solid counsel and guidance, affirmation, and pushback? Well, I think we're just having a little Holy Ghost session. That thanks for your time together today, everybody. Anyone else have anything else you want to chime in before we wrap up? Thank you, Sarah Beth. You wanna say that aloud?
Which part?
Oh, sorry. Oh, just what you put in the chat. Did you want to comment on that at all?
Yeah, just agreeing with Dr. Riley about, I feel like I've been commenting a lot, but my husband and I, this has been a question we have wrestled with a lot and just have a lot of conversations on. He told me the other day, he said, I think maybe older people are feeling left out, and like a God-given role of passing on this life experience and wisdom and life skills. You know, you no longer go to even your grandparents to ask them things, because we think we have the ability to look it up ourselves. And maybe that we have some basic things we can look up ourselves, but are we really getting that fullness of knowledge?
That was such a great takeaway. Sophia.
I know that there's reasons probably that we feel a lot of fear when we look at the future, but it's also a time of great opportunity. Like when we see what a dangerous path can be or is, we're in a moment where we can make a decision and sift through important truths and realities and make commitments that otherwise we might not be aware of to bring up or discuss. So yeah, it's discouraging, but it's an opportunity we're in.
I love that reminder. I love that reminder to kind of wrap us up on too. Because I think statistically speaking, if you look at visitations from the Lord in Scripture and through his agents in the earth, so often the very first pronouncement is, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Fear not. Fear not. We're not likely on the right path if our fundamental orientation to the world and the world that God loves is one of fear. Jesus' fundamental orientation toward that world is one of great love. So that's a great reminder. Be of good cheer. I've overcome the world. So thank you all so much for your participation. Goodness, we could go on and on, but this has been such a good opportunity to get your thoughts. And we'll see you in 2 weeks when Dr. Riley will lead. And then 2 weeks after that, Ms. Shaltanis will be leading in a discussion, a Socratic dialogue on Brave New World. And Ash led us a couple of weeks ago, and I have the recording, so I'll be sending that out. So thanks for registering for all the talks, and if you can ever make it to the live ones, we certainly welcome you here. Your presence and interaction definitely enriches the experience. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.